speech. It's about how 9/11 was a false flag setup. 9/11, those two numbers have sparked some of the most in-depth debates since the very minute it happened. Unfortunately, not all of the facts were released on the downfall in the story of the now symbolized Twin Towers. A simple question and answer session for the 9/11 Commission shows that many of the inquiries are going to be left unanswered. This is an answer to a question asked of Condoleezza Rice 16 days after the terrorist attack on 9/11. I do not remember any reports to us a kind of strategic warning that planes might be used as weapons. This is not true, however, according to AmericanProgress.org. Rice was the top national official with President Bush at the July 2001 G8 summit in Genoa, and she was informed of an incoming attack of a suicidal crashing an airliner. This is just one example of the falseness the United States has fed us about the 9/11 terrorist attack. This speech's main purpose is to enlighten the listener to the so-called terrorist attacks on 9/11 and that they were an extravagant setup to fool the American public. This kind of organization is called a false flag attack. A false flag, in dictionary terms, is a covert operation designed to deceive the public in such a way that another entity carried out the actions. A more simplified definition is this: when a government creates an attack, whether it be physical or mental, to confuse the public into thinking the government is doing the right thing. False flag operations have been enacted in the past and will be used again, unfortunately. Sadly, many of the claims by the 9/11 Commission report are unproven and have been shown to be misleading. The United States has used the false flag technique to get into almost every war the country has ever been involved in. The United States has done this because it's an easy way to get the public behind the war. Wars are the biggest money makers in history for the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States, and the total cost of the war today is $607 billion. And this money contains interest from the Federal Reserve Bank, so to pay this debt back, the United States will have to pay a certain percentage of every dollar plus that dollar. At just 2% interest when paid off, the Federal Reserve Bank will receive over 1 trillion something. It's past the trillion, I can't remember the number. That is a ridiculous amount of money to be in debt to its bank, especially to a country. The Vietnam War cost the U.S. $686 billion, and the national debt since then has been corrected. But how much money did the Vietnam War make the Federal Reserve Bank? The Vietnam War was caused by the Gulf of Tonkin incident. For those that did not know what that was, the North Vietnamese torpedo boats launched an unprovoked attack against a U.S. destroyer on routine patrol in Tonkin Bay on August 2nd, and that the North Vietnamese PT boats followed up with a deliberate attack on a pair of U.S. ships 2 days later. Although the truth about what has actually happened was depressingly different. What really happened was this: rather than being on a routine patrol on August 2nd, the U.S. destroyer Maddox was actually engaged in aggressive intelligence gathering maneuvers, which was in sync with coordinated attacks on North Vietnam and the South Vietnamese Navy and the Laotian Air Force. These details were officially revealed only later after the war was over. The Gulf of Tonkin, this shows what began the Vietnam War. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was a false flag set up by the U.S. government just to get the public behind the war. This is not the only false flag organization carried out by the U.S. though. Certain details about the incident at Pearl Harbor have even shown evidence for another false flag setup. Though the attack on Pearl Harbor actually happened, but the U.S. allowed the attack to occur, was the thing about it being a false flag. Security details released after the cheap shot attack at Pearl Harbor revealed that after having broken the Japanese encryption codes, the Americans knew what was going to happen, when and where, but the United States President did not dispatch this information to Pearl Harbor. The single act caused the U.S. to enter the war against almost no single U.S. citizen's wishes. After the terrorist attack on the Twin Towers, the United States was in utter chaos. It was one of the most horrifying times in U.S. history. People were buying gas masks, threats of anthrax were being made and upheld, and some, more drastic than others, were even building underground bomb shelters. because of terrorists, whoever thought the people in turbans you only see on television would just up and bomb the U.S. But for what reason? Jealousy or religious purposes? Those are the only reasons that were on the news anyway, and the internet or anywhere else. Until now, anyway. Now, if we're surfing the internet, thousands of results will pop up on those 9/11 terrorist attacks happened, but the results don't often show the original perpetrator. The results show the United States government as the attacker. This is a lot of information to take in at once, but don't shun this speech just yet. Cavalcades of evidence are stacking up against the United States, and it seems officials are getting more secretive every day. There are dozens of theories on how the government carried out this false flag attack. One of these theories is that the World Trade Center towers were brought down by controlled demolition. Controlled demolition simply means the demolishing of the building using controlled means, such as dynamite or other explosives. A popular explosive that conspiracy theorists presume brought down the Twin Towers is nanothermite. Nanothermite is a substance that is stable at room temperature and in normal atmospheric conditions, but extremely violent when ignited. Nanothermite is basically a powder mix between aluminum and a metal oxide that, when lit, produces an aluminothermic reaction. That's what it's called. Nanothermic is used by welders because of metal cutting capabilities. Also, it burns hot enough to produce molten steel, which was found at the bottom of the World Trade Center wreckage. There is evidence of metal cutting in the ruins of the World Trade Center because of diagonally cut beams shown in a lot of pictures. Building demolishing, and also an aviation expert made a comment after the terrorist strikes with 5 years aviation and 25 years metal fabrication under my belt. The famous diagonal cut picture, when in fact looked at correctly, is supports the case for controlled demolition using nanothermite. But it brings you to the question, who was actually behind the 9/11 terrorist attack? It's a great question, because thousands of people throughout the United States have been asking that for a number of years now. A senior council member for the 9/11 Commission once stated this: at some level of government, at some point in time, there was an agreement not to tell what happened. This little comment shows that the truth is being withheld from the public. In a book by Jesse Ventura, a former governor, he stated this: I certainly never expected that certain elements of the Bush administration were complicit with the enemy. Today, though, I am convinced that some people inside our government knew the attack was going to happen and come to let it pass because it furthered their political agenda. According to Ventura, the decision to stand down of the fighter jets the decision for the fighter jets was supposed to defend us was none other than Norman Mineta, the Secretary of Transportation at the time. The planes that were to intercept the planes were about to fly into the World Trade Center towers were told to stand down. That's a shocking revelation. Although Mineta isn't the only one to blame, it's hard to figure out who was really behind it, but he is a good place to start. And then, the United States government enacted the 9/11 false flag plan for multiple reasons. The easiest one is to get the American public behind the war. But one of the worst is to strip the Middle East of all its oil. The Middle East is one of the biggest oil deposits in the world, but thankfully the United Nations have sanctions on how much oil the U.S. can remove from Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan. And the U.S. has appealed to these sanctions to be lifted multiple times. Most disturbing of the motives, though, is to pass the Patriot Act. According to David Ray Griffin, the United States needed the American public to be scared, vulnerable, and weak so they could pass the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act states that the act dramatically reduced restrictions on law enforcement agencies to search telephone, mail communications, medical, financial records, and eased restrictions on foreign intelligence gathering within the United States. And it expanded the Secretary of Treasury's authority to regulate financial transactions, particularly those involving foreign individuals, and broadened and entities and broaden the discretion of law, immigration, and authorities in detaining and deporting immigrants suspected of terrorism-related acts. In the lesser terms, this act gave the government the ability to tap phones, and record anything they wanted the public, and regulate any paycheck, and search the houses and legally torture you if they deem you a terrorist. This is depressing and horrifying all at the same time. The government enacted the 9/11 false flag set up to gain money from the people of America and other countries and to take almost every power away from the American public. That one act of brutality from a government can convince almost an entire population that it should give up its rights in a democracy. It's just terrifying. Winston Churchill once said that the truth is incontrovertible, and malice may attack it, ignorance may deride it, but in the end, there it is. Thank you guys for listening to the speech. Appreciate it.
Very good, Jay.